tool that we can think about using as a standard as we go forward. So I'm sure that is a good word for lots of people as we think about the virus. We're going to begin our agenda study, and you can see from the agenda the first thing we will do on Monday at 3 is have no presentations or proclamations. Committee report. Did I hear something?
So we've got 2 callers that we can't mute. Robert Boyles and David Bayhan. We need you guys to mute your phones, please.
Robert Boyles, if you can hear. Okay. I'm sorry for that. And then we have the approval of the consent agenda, and the consent agenda includes the minutes as well of our meeting and the utility committee meeting, and then under city attorney C1.
I'm gonna dismiss Robert Boyles and David Bayhan because they're feeding back. I'm gonna dismiss them. Okay.
Kevin, actually, that's Palmer trying to talk.
Is it?
I think it's Robert Boyles. Palmer, can you talk for a second? No, you're muted still, Palmer. Some level maybe on your headset. You know, up here you can also mute on the top of it. That the top button. Well, that's interesting because Robert Boyles has left and we still hear it, don't we? You're not on yet, sir. Do you have a wired headset that you could plug into your computer at all? Or go to your speaker? We still have that interference going on, Kevin.
Yeah, I think it's Palmer trying to talk. I took those others off. Can't hear you yet, Palmer.
Hey, Kevin, ask him to unplug his headset because that might help just not using the headset.
And Kevin, this is Mike. You also have a way disappeared from mine.
I've taken those off that I couldn't mute. Everyone's muted right now except for me and the mayor.
Palmer, can you hear us? Why don't could you move to another office, sir?
Or could we have Ramona take over?
Yeah, Ramona, would you like to, do you have
Palmer may be coming down here.
Probably a good idea. Let's just, if you don't mind. There's still that feedback going on, Kevin.
I don't know where it's coming from. I'm gonna take Palmer off.
That's the ghost of City Hall. You do know that.
Hey, Kevin, I've got Palmer's in my office, so we can switch places after I do the modification at X, please.
The one that says talking.
Okay, I've taken Palmer's computer off the system, and it sounds like that was it.
I think it was it because it was the one showing talking.
All right.
Okay,
I
we'll work on that
apologize.
later. No, that's all right. That's something you can check on after the meeting.
Yeah, if Palmer's ready to go, that would be great. If he's with Ramona,
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
we can go ahead and start with the third modification to the parking license agreement. It's one of those items on consent.
Okay, go ahead. Which that would be the
C2,
two.
C2.
Okay,
C2.
go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, good morning, commissioners. This is a third modification to the FedEx agreement. This is for use of 100 spaces in the Main Street garage. FedEx at this point is seeking to terminate use of those spaces. And of those 100 spaces that they've been using, 75 of those were subleased to Mid-Florida. And that was pursuant to a sublease agreement that was approved by the city. At the existing rate, FedEx was paying the city $20.69 per space. FedEx is now, as a result of the termination, seeking to terminate its use of the 100 spaces and then lease 30 spaces in exchange in the Heritage Garage. And that would be instead at market rate of $70 per space per month. And that would be effective May 1st, 2020.
Excellent. Any questions on this from commissioners? Commissioner Reed. You're still muted, sir. Although it shows on your screen, you're right. Check on the top of your little handset right here. Headset. That button. Commissioner Reed, can you hear me? On the top of look on the top of this headset, right here. It's a little button. And that button can sometimes, on your headset.
Can y'all hear me? No.
Paul, yeah, Palmer, we heard. I think we heard you.
Palmer, we can hear you.
Am I good? Okay, great, awesome.
You're good. And Commissioner Reed, can you check your? Now try, Commissioner Reed. I think you're on. No.
No.
It's this. If it's on top, if it is on, Commissioner Reed, can you hear me? Commissioner Reed, you're working now because we can hear you fiddling with it. So just put it on your ear. That's good. Go talk. You're good. Commissioner Reed? Darn. Touch that while it's on your ear, just touch that button on the top once. All right. Is there any other commissioner that wants to say something on this one? I'm sorry. Commissioner Madden, go ahead.
I thought I'd check and see if you could hear me too at the same time.
You can. Very good.
So you did not mention, will Mid-Florida continue leasing the 75 spaces in the Main Street garage?
Yes, Commissioner. Actually, Mid-Florida will be leasing those 75 spaces directly from the city, and that will be at market rate of $70 per space per month.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Palmer, let's go to C1 then.
Okay, C1 is just,
Mr. Mayor, if I can, Palmer, Commissioner Reed's still trying to ask a question. I just don't know if he's able to.
Can we put an IT person in there?
We've sent somebody in there. We're trying to figure that out.
Thank you. The integration I get sometimes is on the top where, see if I hit.
I'll go ahead and address C1 while we're doing that. C1 is routine. We just have a matter coming up in May, a land use matter that by statute would require one of the hearings to occur after 5 p.m. unless waived by a majority of the city commission. So this is just requesting that the city commission waive that after 5 o'clock hearing requirement.
Any questions or problems with anyone on that basis? Commissioner Reed, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I did that a while ago.
Okay. Well, it's Tracy's magic touch. All right. Go ahead.
Yes, I think Stephanie may have asked my question. There again, I had spoken briefly to Palmer yesterday and asked him some questions about the lease. And there again, I had hoped that it would free open these spaces to the general public. But I guess from what I gather, Mid-Florida is going to take them at market rate. That was I kind of answered my question. And I had another question to Palmer that he was going to get me an answer today, but I don't recall what it was. I hope he does.
Yeah, I think you're.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of those questions was how the term of the lease and Mid-Florida is on a month-to-month parking lease.
So we could, if we had somebody wanted to do something in downtown, we would have those spaces. We could do them a long-term lease with to incentivize them to come downtown or something.
I think right now there's some discussion with Mid-Florida possibly moving to the SunTrust space, and then that would free up those 75 spaces, but that's still being discussed, I believe. So that would open up those 75 spaces.
City Manager Delgado, I think, has an add on to this. Hold on just 1 second. Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, I don't want to cut Commissioner Reed off. He's got another question.
Is $70 the market rate?
That is the market rate.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, it might be appropriate to have John Yancey. I see John's face this Friday morning. As you know, John handles a lot of this for us. To kind of John, if you could give a real quick overview of what we're trying to do now that the Heritage Garage has been open. I know you and I have talked many times about what you're trying to shuffle around in order to get some of those Main Street parking spaces open. If you can do just a real quick overview, that'd be great. I think that'll answer some of the questions.
Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, so our main focus with the Heritage Garage opening up is to kind of displace and shift some parkers around so that we can free up strategic spaces throughout the city, not just in one particular location. So by moving FedEx over to Heritage, it benefits them because they can actually use the spaces because it's right there next to their location. However, it also, obviously monetarily frees up and gets us market rate for those spaces. To touch a little bit on what Ramona was saying, we are very close to moving Mid-Florida over to the SunTrust. They're very interested. They're just kind of going through the proverbial red tape that everybody has to go through, so that we should be hearing something that in probably next week. That would free up all 100 of those spaces that FedEx just vacated out of Main Street. So that would give us those to, like you said, Commissioner Reed, to, look at bringing other companies downtown and frees up spaces for really whatever we want to do, and gives us the power to, either stay at market rate or go another direction. So that's kind of where we're at. And I think parking's in a really good spot right now, and we're continuing to trudge forward.
Great, John. Any questions for Commissioner Franklin?
Yes, Mayor. I just think as much attention as parking downtown gets, I think this what we've just shared here, I think would be good to have not on consent agenda Monday, because I think a lot of people are following that and they're wanting to see now that we have a new parking garage, how is that shifting the puzzle downtown? I think it'd be good to have that on Monday.
I would agree with that. Our other commitments, thumbs up if you agree. All right, so we will put that off of the consent agenda. Thank you very much. Good suggestion. And then C5, sir.
Okay, so C5 is related. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. C5 is related to the first zoning ordinance you have on the agenda today, related to the Grand Villa Assisted Living and Memory Facility just south of Tigertown on Lakeland Hills Boulevard. They are expanding their facility to add 10 beds. And as a result of that, it kicks in some different zoning requirements, and it also it requires 15 additional parking spaces, which they do not have room for on their property. So they have requested to lease 15 spaces in the Tigertown parking lot, just to the east of their facility. And so that's what this license agreement does. It gives them the right to lease 15 parking spaces in the Tigertown parking lot. They would pay $10 per space, which is the market rate out there, actually, as opposed to downtown. It's a five-year term with automatic 5-year renewals unless terminated. Every 5 years, the parking rate would be subject to a CPI adjustment. They would have the right to park in these 15 spaces, except when spring training games are going on. So they would not have that right during the games and for 3 hours before and after those games. They're going to have to construct a sidewalk between the parking lot and their facility over a grassy area, and we're requiring that they construct that sidewalk such that cars can drive over it. So it'll have to be 4 feet wide, and the concrete's got to be at least 6 inches thick. It's going to have some in-ground lighting that is designed to be driven over by cars as well. They're going to provide insurance, $1 million of commercial general liability and $1 million umbrella. I think that those are the main terms of this agreement.
Any questions by Commissioner? Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Ms. Could you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Palmer, for that, because I was the one that was asking questions about that development that would be next to them, for the affordable housing situation. And I want to also thank Ms. Teresa Mayo for that clarification of that situation, because I had it confused in some respect, but I know they're going to be next to each other. And I was concerned about, the parking element regarding the affordable housing situation that will be coming up, which again is next to this senior facility. But again, I appreciate the clarification. Thank you so much.
And these 15 spaces in Tigertown, Mr. Donahue, are not utilized spaces typically for anything that you need. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. The parking lot is virtually empty most of the days, and spring training was the only area that we were worried about, and they were able to accommodate that. So, no, we're good to go.
Okay. Any other questions by commissioners? Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, unfortunately, when I was trying to get my microphone, I missed some stuff on 3 and 4 that I would like to ask a question on, if I may, when you're ready to move on.
Sure, we're doing consent only, which is why we passed those, and we will be coming back to that.
Okay, that's 3 and 4 on the consent. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not consent. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right. Any other questions on the parking spaces? All right, then let's look on the, and do you want to leave that on consent also? Yes, okay. Then let's look at Finance Director appropriation, if you could. Mr.
Yes,
Bosar.
good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Throughout the fiscal year, the city receives various donations from private individuals that are designated for expenditure on specific projects or operating expenses at the donor's request. What we do is twice a year bring those auto appropriations to the commission. They are usually, if we receive the revenues, we auto appropriate that exact expense or less and bring those to you. Most of them are, as you can see, small numbers, grants that were unanticipated, reimbursements for overtime for our coworkers in the police department. And we have a couple of the larger ones, as you can see, for the sale of the property that's becoming Meriton, as well as the sale of the property for Summit.
My bad. Excuse me. Did I get disconnected? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
hear you.
All right.
Yeah,
I
Mike,
didn't hear you.
Mike, are you done with that item?
Yes, I am. I think Commissioner Franklin had his hand up, though.
Oh, I didn't see it. Commissioner Franklin, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, my question for you on looking at the, I assume, well, I'm guessing, shouldn't assume that FLETF, is that like Florida Law Enforcement Task Force or something, the confiscated?
Trust fund. Yeah, Florida law. It's law enforcement trust fund.
Okay. I mean, it looks like, I mean, I've seen it on there before. I hadn't really looked at the numbers, and a couple of them jumped out, but there's like $450,000 to $500,000 there. Does that money go straight into LPD for their projects, or where does it go?
Well, those monies have strings attached to them that they cannot be used for, say, operating, general operating or general capital. They are defined whether they have ties to the state or ties federally. They are all defined, and Charlie Dormer, the finance expert in PD, manages those very tightly.
Yeah, no, I wasn't looking to figure out how we could grab them. I assume they're earmarked for law enforcement, but is that a predictable enough number that LPD makes that part of their budget, or is that sort of icing on the top, or how's that work?
Yes, those monies, as they have, say, a drug bust or something along those lines, those are not predictable. And so, when they occur, those monies, when they are provided to Ruben's group, we then auto appropriate those, but they're not predictable.
If I may, Commissioner Franklin and Mr. Mayor, Ruben Garcia is on the line. I see Ruben. He might want to chime in and tell you how some of those monies are utilized. But Mike is right. They're not predictable. A lot of it is done through cases, confiscation, those type of things. So it really depends on the number of cases they're working. But if Ruben's on the line, I'm curious if he can kind of tell you how they're expended.
That would be great if you could do that, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, the bulk of the funds is used for police training and police equipment outside our normal budget operating, as well as a number of charitable donations throughout the community that we help various 501c with. So a lot of that money goes back into the community. And the rest of it is used for, like I said, either police training or appropriating equipment that we don't normally have budgeted.
All right. Any other questions by commissioners? Okay. Yes, Commissioner Walker.
Not a question, Mr. Mayor, but it's just to piggyback on what Chief has said. A number of years ago, when we started getting, especially ask from the nonprofits in our community about situations regarding, either it was kind of somewhat related to law enforcement or law enforcement kind of particular items. The city or the commission, of course, as you know, from that point forward, have utilized those dollars to this trust fund to support a number of the programs, a number of the actual events that we have in our city that are somewhat, have some law enforcement tied to it. That these different nonprofits they have and maintain throughout the course of the past number of years.
Excellent. And it is interesting because there are lots of little numbers in there. So these are maybe some things that people donate over the course of the year, organizations donate, and then we just pigeonhole them. Okay, very good. Any problem with leaving that on consent? All right, I see none. So then next we have that's it on consent agenda items. So let's go flipping back over to equalization hearing. There's no request from the public. And there is no equalization, correct, Palmer?
Correct.
All right, so public hearings. We have ordinances, second reading.
Yes, this is the zoning ordinance that I referenced when I was speaking to the parking license agreement out of Tigertown. They're adding 10 beds to their facility. They're not expanding the footprint of the facility, just adding the 10 beds, but nonetheless, that is kicking in a requirement that they change from an office zoning category to a C1 commercial zoning category. And just to the question of how close this is to the affordable housing proposed development on Bella Vista, there's an aerial map in the agenda item that shows where this subject property is. And the affordable housing Bella Vista property is to the southeast of that map. It actually is not even on the map. So there is a good distance between these two facilities. I'm not sure if Teresa is on the line and can show anything or not.
I don't see Teresa on camera-wise. Teresa, are you on a phone?
I am on, yes.
Oh, there you are.
Did you need me to share? Did you need me to share the map?
Please.
Teresa, do you need me to pull it up or do you have it now?
I have it. I just need access to the screen button.
I will take care of you. You're a go.
Great, thank you.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, so this again is the subject property. The parking would be in this area. And the Bella Vista or Parker Point affordable housing community is, as Palmer said, way off the map, down to the right of this corner here.
Okay. Any questions by commissioners?
Just one clarification, the parking is actually in the asphalt area. It's not in the grassy area. There'll be a sidewalk between the asphalt area and the assisted living facility all over the grassy area to connect the two.
So they're parking immediately to the east of, well, yeah, that's east of that grassy area, the 15
Correct.
spaces. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right, sir, your next item.
I think we're to city manager.
Yeah, we are city manager. Sorry. Go ahead. Mr. Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commission. One item under City Manager for Monday, that is an award of a bid to Ranger Fire Inc. for fire sprinkler system updates at the Yuki Theater at the RP Funding Center. In February, the city issued a request for bid for this system at the Yuki Theater. The project includes modifications of the existing fire sprinkler system in the basement and the back of the house of the theater, as well as the new fire sprinkler system in the main theater seating area itself. The item is required as pursuant to Life Safety Code as part of the upgrades to the facility that were done earlier in the year and last year, and have been awaiting an opportunity to be managed through the event schedule. Given the fact that we're under this current COVID-19 situation, the advertisement was advanced, and the work will be performed using an accelerated schedule. The measure will minimize the downtime of the existing system and avoid impacts to the theater once we're able to reopen. On March 16th of this year, the city's purchasing department received a bid from Ranger Fire Inc. out of Saginaw, Texas for $293,006. City staff, along with our engineering firm on record, Hatcher Engineering, reviewed the bid and confirmed the scope of the work complies with the project's requirements. Funding is secured through our fiscal year 2020 RP Funding Center Public Improvement Fund. Thus, it's recommended that the City Commission authorize on Monday the opportunity to move forward at an accelerated pace with Ranger Fire Inc. for a cost of $293,006.
And were they the only ones quoting?
That's as far as I know, and I see Tony Camarillo's on the line. He can answer those questions.
Yeah, they were the only bidder, but we were very happy with the price they came in because I think we had anticipated a little bit of a higher price. But yep, they were the only bidder. We're very happy with the work we've done with them in the last few weeks, just kind of preparing and asking for them to accelerate because, unfortunately, this opportunity we're kind of flipping the calendar here a little bit. Some of our events that would have taken place March, April, are now being pushed to July, and this really frees up that time. So we'll be able to recoup those events. There's 3 dance events alone that will move to July that are very important revenue generating events for us. So we're hoping this helps us move things forward.
Great. Commissioner McCarley.
Tony, how much did we budget for that?
For that project?
Did you hear me?
Yeah, for the project itself. we were thinking closer to $500,000. We have about $1 million left in our capital fund for the construction project. It was primarily for this and for our restroom project. So those two projects we're trying to squeeze into that final amount of capital. If you remember, I can't remember at what point some of the commissioners were on, but I did go back to the county to ask for more money to finish projects as part of our renovation project. And this is the last two major projects that we have left to be done. This one, unfortunately, had to wait a little bit longer because we had to do it in the summer. So it's probably a year past when we really would have wanted to do it. But I think, unfortunately, this situation will really benefit us for some of those events that we were able to, had to be postponed.
So what you're saying, you were guessing 500,000.
Yeah, I think Richard and I think Fee might be on, but yeah, we were somewhere around there because it's such an intense project. Think about the Yuki Theater, the high ceiling, back of the house space, and when things got once the engineer did their work, which took quite a long time, and we kind of figured eventually what the cost would come down to. We were very, very surprised. I'm sorry, very happy with that number. And there's some other things. We got to do some scaffolding and painting, but this is the bulk of it.
Great. And it's a vendor you've used. Did you infer that?
I'm sorry, I did not, but they've been great to work with. I can tell you that they've been very accommodating. We looked at the schedule several times. When the crisis all started to occur and we needed to make the shifts, they came in and revised some scheduling and were able to come up with a great schedule for us.
Commissioner Reed, you had a comment, question?
Thank you. There again, it's a shame we can't get more bids than one. But Tony, is this is a redo, or why wasn't this done years past?
This is original Yuki Theater, utility. So it's been an upgrade that was necessary for a long time. It's just having the money to actually get it done was really the thing. There were some code issues as it relates to that. Cheryl was very interested in making sure this project got done for probably a few years now.
City Manager Delgado.
Yeah, and Commissioner Reed, as you are quite aware, anytime we do renovations or rehabilitations, we have to go back and start taking a look at certain code requirements such as ADA, fire, life safety, those type of things. So as we started moving and doing our renovation of the center, this became something of a necessity.
City Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you. I just continuing the thought about vendors and those who submitted bids, and we say that we advanced the advertisement for this project. I was curious what all that entailed, and I just want to make sure that we did not, if we had local vendors who might have been capable, and maybe we don't, just wanted to discuss that a little bit.
Well, there certainly would be some in Orlando that have the capacity.
Yeah, Richard may want to chime in, and I'm not sure if anybody from purchasing is here, but we did put this out in a while back as well. So I believe it went out twice.
Okay.
This group out of Texas is actually their local folks that are going to actually do the work. So we did questions as well. I believe the parent company's out of Texas, but there's a local group that's here that's going to be doing the work.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Tony.
Perfect. Was your primary interest, correct, at some level, Commissioner McLeod?
Yes, yeah, that's correct, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that? All right. That takes us back to the City Attorney, and we will go to first reading on ordinances.
Mayor, Commissioner Madden wants to speak.
Oh, Commissioner Madden, I'm sorry, I missed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're not, you muted again. Sorry. Start again, please. Perfect.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I did want to just, this is a great opportunity because we are, as a city, realizing that when we renovate a facility, then that triggers code. Can you hear me, Tony? Tony's pointing to his ears like this.
No, the other Tony.
I can hear now.
That's okay.
I'm hearing now the question.
Okay. So I just really wanted to bring this up because I know at the last meeting I was, requesting some of our codes with regard to fire and how sometimes ours are more severe and more strict than the state codes. And so I know that we've had a lot of expenses at RP Funding Center and that this next strategic planning is probably going to be a lot more austere tone than we had hoped originally. And so I would like to know, I know that we had to do a lot of foam spray in the auditorium, in the arena, to be able to have the magic come. And so I just would like to see what the expense as a percentage of the renovation cost was updating our fire, and what of that was just strictly state code required, and if anything was more because of us having a more stringent city code. So that's just something that if we could have for the future, I would appreciate that.
City Manager Delgado, can you make a comment on that?
Commissioner, we'll certainly do that for you. Obviously, state code,
sure, be happy to,
and federal code as they relate to public assembly facilities, arenas, and theaters is probably a little different than as they relate to corporate buildings and those type of developments. So we'll make sure you get those directly as they relate to these type of public assembly facilities when you're putting 2,000, 3,000 people into a smaller space.
Very good. All right, that brings us back to any other questions before I race on? All right, that brings us then to City Attorney A1.
Thank you. A1 and A2 are related. A1 is an amendment to the comprehensive plan, and A2 is a related zoning change. This is out at Bridgewater on a portion of the old golf course there. The most of that golf course has been redeveloped for warehouse and distribution uses. This is approximately 7.5 acres that is going to be redeveloped for single-family housing, and to be precise, 100 single-family detached dwelling units. Just on the north side of the Bridgewater development, and I think Teresa is just coming on to hopefully show a little bit more.
Look at that.
Getting to be a pro at it.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so this is, you see I-4 up on the top. Down here is Caspian Court. This is what is referred to as Village 3 of the villages. This is Village 14 currently. This area here is what's being added to allow for an extension of Village 14. And it would result in Caspian Court being extended through and connecting with Great Bear Drive. The lots in here are proposed to be 40-foot lots, so they would be consistent with what's already been developed in Village 3. And the reason for the land use change is because this area that's being added was previously part of the business industrial park over to the east and has an existing designation of conservation. And so it's placing a residential future land use on it and then bringing it into the planned unit development zoning for Bridgewater.
Commissioner Reed has a question.
Thank you. Teresa, Village 14, they're modifying those from 55s to 40s?
No, Village 14 currently is, I believe, the 40-foot lots. So this is just adding that area to Village 14.
Okay, I thought Village 14 was bigger lots than that. Maybe, but I thought they were bigger.
Yeah, the village to the very southeast has larger lots, but this one did not.
I think it's 12 and 13.
This is the one
Right here. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And this is the area where we created the large buffer.
Correct. So as a result of the business park that's being developed, they were required to put in a substantial buffer that included a berm with landscape material.
Right. Which actually doesn't show on that picture, does it, on that aerial?
It does not. This is an old aerial, and Chuck Barnby did mention that he's been out there recently and that the berm has been installed and meets what was required from the zoning.
Excellent. Any other questions by commissioners? Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will have to agree with Ms. Teresa in her assessment where she said that the berm has been have been placed there. But my question, and I cannot remember when we first talked about this in the development situation with the distribution center out there. Now with this adding some additional residential as we are with, I just heard 100 maybe or so single family homes. Where are we with the traffic in that along that 33 area that comes into, brings into the Bridgewater development? I'm glad to see, of course, the development coming to its full bloom, but I'm still concerned about, and I think we should be along 33 there when because you got that new apartment complex that's portion, the new apartment complex that's in the county, and at the intersection almost of where Cumbie 33 connects and Bridgewater's entrance is. How are we dealing with, or how are we going to be with traffic?
So the Bridgewater development is also part of a development agreement that addressed their concurrency requirements for transportation. So they have approval for 702 single family units total. Bringing in this property is going to add another 32 units, which I believe resulted in about 30 p.m. peak hour vehicular trips. And they are basically taking some of the concurrency approval they have received for a retail component of this portion of this development and transferring it to this village. So that's partly how the traffic is being addressed. Beyond that, there are some improvements that will likely be made in the future, including the extension of what is Trade Court Boulevard, which would be an extension to the north eventually. And there are provisions in here also for pedestrian connections to allow for connection to a trail that will ultimately be along that Trade Court Boulevard extension.
Thank you, ma'am. I was just making sure we're making sure, of course, our traffic counts and those kind of things are part of that, still part of the, I guess, a total number that they have as part of their development, is coming to fruition. Thank you again.
Yes. So they are covered by the development agreement.
Any other commissioner questions? And then, City Attorney Davis, you mentioned that these two are tied. So differentiate between the two.
Okay, the first ordinance is changing the future land use map in the comprehensive plan, which has to happen in order to facilitate the zoning change. And the second ordinance is the actual zoning change with site conditions and that type of thing.
Okay. Any other questions on those two? Thank you very much, Teresa. Appreciate that. That brings us down to C3.
Yes, C3 and C4 are both related. This is a substantial project. This is to replace the clear well out of the T.B. Williams water treatment plant off Kathleen Road. That clear well, which is used to store the finished water after it's been treated, is at the end of its useful life. And I'll let Tom Mattiacci or Bill Anderson talk about that in a minute, and I'll just go over the contracts real quickly. The first contract is with Tetra Tech, the design engineer for the project, and this is a modification to increase the cost for their services by $338,000, bringing their total fee to $1,325,000. And the reason for the increase is primarily because it's been determined that this project is going to take twice as long as originally envisioned to complete as it's gone through the design phase. The second contract, C4, is a modification to the construction manager at risk contract we have currently that we entered into in 2018 with Wharton Smith. A construction manager at risk contract is often used in a larger project like this. What it does is it essentially brings the contractor on board during the design phase to participate in the design of the project to make sure you've got a constructible project once you get through the design. The construction manager at risk will engage in value engineering during the design phase, constructability analysis, look at budget issues, begin working with subcontractors for the project. So it not only expedites, compresses the time schedule, but allows the constructability is ensured at the design phase. And the result of that is that the construction manager at risk is then, because there's a pretty good idea of how much the project is going to cost, construction manager at risk is in a position to provide a guaranteed maximum price. That's what you have under this contract with Wharton Smith. After going through all that process, they are providing the city with a guaranteed maximum price for the project of $17,301,000. And that is going to be funded through the state revolving loan fund through the Department of Environmental Protection. And I don't know if Bill or Tom can come on if you have any, or I can answer any questions about the contract. They can describe exactly what's going on out there and why we need to do this.
Yes, and then if they also could comment on how the construction manager at risk guarantee price top is funded if it goes beyond that. What causes, who pays that?
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't go beyond that because it is a guaranteed maximum price. If we change the scope of the project, then we're changing what they're having to do. That would result in an increase in price. Or if there's unforeseen conditions, that would change the price as well. But generally, that's not going to happen with this type of project because the construction manager at risk is on board during the design phase, is participating in constructability, analyzing site conditions along with the engineer. So it's a higher bar for them to actually request an increase in the price than a normal in design, the engineer designs and then the contractor comes on later.
Okay. Tom, do you have any comments you want to add to that? Or Bill?
Tom Mariachi, Water Utilities. What Palmer is saying is exactly correct. But if there was some sort of a addendum to the guaranteed maximum price needed, the state revolving loan would have to approve also, and they would approve a amendment to the state revolving loan to increase the price.
Okay. I saw Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as I guess I heard City Attorney mention, but as we do know, this project has been on our agenda for probably what, 3 years, 2-3 years now. Yeah, I figured. Yeah, because I remember back some couple 2-3 years now. But and the reason why the longevity and getting to where we are now is because again the design layout. Am I hearing that correct?
I'll let Tom or Bill address that.
What happened? This is a process that we had to go through, Commissioner. Tom Mariachi, Water Utilities again. And what we did first is we brought the engineer on board using the CCNA format because of the cost of the project. And that was brought before you twice. First to go ahead and approve a short list, and then to approve the engineering contract. Then the same process with the construction manager at risk. We brought it before you as a CCNA to approve a short list and then to approve a contract. So you've seen it You've seen this project 4 times. And now we're bringing back before you the contract modifications that are necessary in order to proceed with the construction. So yes, Commissioner, you've seen this a number of times over the past couple of years.
And that was my sentiment, because I wanted to make sure all of us, especially some of the newer colleagues, know, as we've been seeing this for, a couple plus years or so now, what the process is and why it has, taken this long to get to where we are, where we're now about to begin the construction of the actual what we call the Clearwell project. Thank you so much again for that comments.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. There again, I'd like to thank Emily. I got an email from her, and it opened my eyes quite a bit. I wasn't sure where the project was, and that gave me a lot of insight into what we were going to try to do. And those pictures looked like that facility is getting pretty run down. But there again, I couldn't figure out. I don't remember us doing something for approving $17 million, and I wasn't quite sure. And is this project we're doing this time just only $1.3 million, or is it 17 million?
No, the engineering services will total around $1.3 million. The construction is going to be 17 million.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. I just, but I did want to thank Emily for getting that information. There again, I was at a loss on our initial agenda study until I got that email.
Good. Yeah, it was very clarifying. Yes, Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you, Emily and staff, for putting that virtual briefing together. That was very helpful. I would love to get maybe a one-on-one on this, Tony and folks, just to be able to go through the timing of some of the things that fellow colleagues are mentioning in years past, just to make sure I have my hands around the steps that have been taken, what was approved when, where we are now. That would be really helpful if we could set something up on that. And the question I had was on the increase for the engineering services of $338,000. I mean, it seems high to me. And so maybe it's not, maybe for a project of the scope or the changes that we have. I just wondered if somebody could provide some insights on that.
I think
Commissioner Tom Mediachi, Water Utilities. With the engineering authorization, there's 2 things into it. First, there was a lot of communication between the CMAR, the engineer, and the city during this process. This process was done like this because in a major modification at a water plant, there was a lot of risk, and using the CMAR process was the best way to get the design that we wanted, plus to manage the risk. Now, the first of the additional cost for engineering is the $39,000 for the design. There was a lot of design changes that the CMAR made to the initial design, plus the state revolving loan wanted a lot of additional information that the engineer had to respond to. Now, the engineer, back when we first procured engineering services, thought that this would be a 8-month contract. It's actually a 16-month contract coming from the CMAR schedule. So what the engineer did is basically charge an additional $96,000 for construction administration assistance and an additional $202,000 for the resident project manager, which basically doubled that because of the extended construction time over what was initially thought.
Yeah, the engineer will actually have a resident project manager on site all the time. It's not like the engineering firm's just going to come in at certain time periods and check things out, they actually have someone assigned full time to this. So there's a direct correlation between the length of the project and their fee.
And it's complicated. Commissioner Madden.
And Commissioner McLeod, it also does, if you read the some of the things that are included, project description, it also kind of tells you like how they were going to modify existing buildings, and then they have to, they had to make a new building for the electrical supplies. So, you can see that if you were doing engineering or design work, if it was just modifying one building versus building an entirely new building, that would take additional time. So I think, that there is a lot of helpful information on the attachments as well that you might find, good for explaining some of those things too.
All right. Any other comments from commissioners? Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate it. All right, so that is our 3 and 4. And we go to utilities C1.
We only have one item here. This is a renewal and an amendment to our existing lease agreement with GATX. We lease 236 rail cars currently. The contract is set to expire unless we renew it at the end of September. And staff was successful in going ahead and negotiating not only renewal, but also being able to amend that agreement to provide a reduction. We currently pay $225 per car per month, and that's being reduced to $190 per car per month. There's also part of this amendment includes a reduced service charge as well in the event that the cars, for whatever reason, wouldn't be returned on time. That's a reduction. So essentially, the cost for a one-year agreement with GATX is $538,080. This would be included in Lakeland Electric's FY21 budget, subject to approval by the City Commission, and represents a savings of just over $99,000 a year.
Excellent. Questions on this? Commissioner Reed.
Ramona, I know last year we got substantial amount of money on we subleasing some of these cars. Do we know how much we got, and do we anticipate this year on the same scenario?
Tori can probably answer with regard to the amount of money on the subleases.
I'm sure she can, Tori. We can't hear you yet.
Sure.
I can see her, but I can't hear her. Sign language.
Not yet. That showed you muted. That's now. Both of them show a muted logo. Do it once more, and now try and talk. Perfect. Try that, Tori. Oops. No, ma'am. There. Try that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. What we're doing is,
I'm good.
On the GATX set, we've been subleasing it to OUC so that, when we're not using it, instead of putting in storage, OUC's been sharing it with us. And that's why it also shows that in the contract. We have another train with Sandy Cooper that we sublease, and I'll be turning that train in October 1st.
On the subleases, we're able to set our own rates on that?
Well, because OUC is our partner, they own 40% of the train. What we do when we sublease it to them is they just pick up our 60% so that it doesn't cost us anything.
Perfect. Commissioner Reed.
Tony, about how much do we save on that per year?
Well, let me think. We've been subleasing the train from. Oh, hang on. Give me a second. I'll calculate it up. because they're paying their they're paying $225 a car times 110. So that's, come on, computer. We usually do at least, I think my battery's going out on this mouse. They've been subleasing it about 6 months a year at $225 a car times 110. So that's 24 times 6, about 158,000.
158.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Other questions? Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Thank you very much, Tori. All right. Seeing none, that takes us to the end of our.
Mr. Mayor, I think Commissioner Madden.
Commissioner Madden.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Madden. Wow. I don't know. I missed that.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'm slow on my hand getting in front of the camera. Well, first of all, I just think Tori needs to wear a cape to our meetings because she just keeps telling us how she saves money every single time she presents, which is absolutely so amazing. But secondly, I noticed in the attachment, it does say that the cost represents a savings of $99,120 a year. So that's not including the subleasing to OUC?
No, what happened was we were paying $225 for the rail cars, and now we reduced the rate down to $190. So if you take that $225 minus $190, that's $35. And then the fleet's $236 times 12 is where you're getting the $99,120. We called around to see what the savings would go to OUC.
Okay, I heard the mayor and Tori at the same time there at the end, but what did you say, Mayor?
Well, some of that savings then will become the benefit of savings for Orlando as well. We just have the opportunity. So that 158 would become maybe 135 or some number like that.
No, we're both saving because we've reduced the rate down from 225 to 190.
They get the benefit of the savings as well, is what I'm saying.
Yes, they will get the benefit too. You're correct.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions? All right, seeing none and looking once more just to be sure, that brings us to members of the commission. Anything to share? Thank you very much, Tori, by the way. Yes, Commissioner Madden. Commissioner Madden, good. You're not muted. I mean, you're still muted. Commissioner Madden, did you want to share?
Oh, are we on
Yes.
just commissioner sharing? Okay,
Yes.
sorry. So I had a couple of, positive things to share. I noticed, Lakeland Now also showed the picture, but Lakeland High School, Jill Beavis is the Booster Club president, and she and her son went and lighted up the field at Bryant Stadium with "We Love LRH." And so she was actually the one who thought of the Dreadnought Wave. So she had brought that to the Booster Club to have all of the people in the stands wave at the pediatric wing during the football game after the first quarter. And so that was really heartwarming and a special thing that she introduced. And that's been a new tradition at Lakeland High School and kind of brought in that, kind of collaboration and affinity for, Lakeland High School fans towards the hospital. So it was just fun to see that she, took her time to go out there and light up the field and show, just her love for the heroes at the hospital during this time. So that was a bright light. And like I said, Lakeland Now also took a picture of that. So that's up for everyone to see. And I know that Pat Blaylock is one of our biggest fans watching our meetings, agenda studies, and Jill Beavis is her daughter. So I just wanted to say, great job, Jill Beavis and Pat Blaylock, if you're listening, that was heartwarming. Secondly, the LEDC video that was recently published that Andy McIntyre and his team and so many put, even the mayor was there seeing his grandbaby from a distance through the window was so heartwarming. And for me in particular, because I'm waiting any day to get a phone call from my daughter-in-law. She's due on Sunday, but, it could be any time. And so I get to babysit my grandchildren when they go to the hospital because they can only have one visitor and there are certain restrictions, which, the mayor knows all too well. So that was heartwarming and something to bring light to our dark times. But I did also want to mention that, not everybody is feeling as light and bright. And we really wanted to, as a commission, focus wholeheartedly on getting, slowing the spread, getting our healthcare positioned so that they could handle the cases. So exciting about Lakeland Regional opening up that facility, to just really restrict the spread of COVID by having the respiratory care all taking place at the one location. But I really do think it's important at some point, and I would make an appeal even maybe for Monday, to pivot to our business community who is really suffering. I know, my colleagues and I have received requests for small business grants for relief on rent. You don't have to drive around too long and see shuttered businesses everywhere. And, I know people were hopeful for the PPP and the small business, the SBA loans from the state of Florida, all of which are depleted already. And so in a week's time, they're already, it's gone. So many people didn't even have the information to apply or, get with the bank or, websites were shut down so quickly. Same thing with the unemployment. Excuse me. And so, I know it was too soon to bring up the economy or business, prior to now because, the focus was on making sure we're being safe and we're social distancing and we're slowing the spread. And I know that our healthcare workers and our first responders are heroes. But I think it would just be very insensitive to ignore what's happening downtown and with our business entrepreneurs who have closed down. And, I know they're going to, people say, well, they're going to get a check in the mail or there's the PPE, but it is just such a small drop in the bucket in comparison to, the millions of people who are across the country without jobs. And, our shuttered favorite restaurants and small businesses, we want them to be able to emerge after this. So I really was hopeful that maybe, just like, it takes kind of some severity and some sober pictures of body bags and death counts to get us to all social distance. I think we probably need some sobering news, from Corey Skates at the Chamber and some sobering news from Julie Townsend with LDDA, because I think everyone just thinks the economy can just start back up and that jobs are just easy to go out and get again. And I think that even though we have a light at the end of the tunnel with Jacksonville beaches opening and the president saying that the states will have some incremental ability to open up, we really don't know what it's going to look like when we come outside of this cave. And I think it's going to be hard for a long time. And I just think that we as leaders need to hear what the facts are, just like we wanted to hear the facts, the hard facts about the disease, the hard facts about what we have to do to curb the spread. I think we need to hear the cold, hard facts about what our businesses are going through. And I think our community needs to hear that their friends and their neighbors are out of work. Their friends and their neighbors have shut their doors. Their friends and their neighbors don't know if they can come back, and have, that favorite restaurant or that favorite store or that favorite business when this is over. So I don't know how, we would do that. I don't know if, like I mentioned Corey Skates and, Julie Townsend, thinking more that those are the smaller businesses and the ones that are most affected. But if there was a way that they could share with us what's happening, I don't know, if we could do city grants. I know that it gives perspective because I know that like our police officers do feel like they're on the front lines and that their job is more dangerous right now. And they're right in saying that. And they're comparing that with other city workers who might have to go home and still get paid and aren't working and still getting paid. And I know that the reason we're here is because we're coming from the private sector to represent taxpayers, to represent people who aren't promised a pension, who are not promised a paycheck, who will not know if they have a job at the end of this thing, who are stressed and up at night and cannot, they want the PPP loan, but yet that means they have to keep their employees to get it. How long would they have to keep it? And is their PPP, enough to go around? So I've been holding back because I know that people, felt like it was insensitive to bring up the economy before now. But I just don't think that we can ignore it any longer. And I just would like to, in some way, hear from some people who are going through really hard times so that we can, I think it's going to, when Commissioner McCarley brought up bringing up our strategic planning, and that was the first I'd heard of it. Sometimes in our meetings, it's hard to kind of listen to a new idea and have an immediate thought. I'm absolutely, 100% in support of her wanting to do that. I was worried last week that we might not have enough data to be able to make some of the hard decisions that I think we're going to have to make. But, maybe we do. And, maybe that we should start. I'm okay with having it sooner than later, but I have to I'm one person, I'm one of 7, but we have to, there should be as severe and austere and sober of a tone going into this budget season for our city as there is on the news with body bags and, people dying from this disease. I just feel like that if, it's hard to ask for $10,000 during budget season. How are we going to grapple with making cuts of major consequence of millions of dollars? And so, that I just felt like I wanted to make an appeal today that we do need to start to pivot and look at these devastating numbers, staggering statistics, and make sure that we're posturing ourselves for hard decisions in this upcoming strategic planning, and also hearing from our community to help us feel the severity of it, so that we do what's wise and best. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. I think that there are some significant differences, and it isn't that we want to compare those two things because they're different. I mean, and I know you're not trying to do that between health and business. A death is over, and you can say, well, a business can die too, but the remedies are beyond necessarily the city's funds to do some of those things. They do have banking relationships. They do have, and there's going to be a greater tolerance in recovery in many of those relationships. And what we also have to remember is that some businesses were dying all along the time, always go out of businesses. There are businesses that are marginal that don't survive. I've been in one of them myself. So and when you need to turn it off, and it doesn't make it, and there isn't a remedy for that. So your concern, which I understand, is that we're making sure we're not being insensitive to businesses that are on a precipice that might need some bridging aid, because we also don't know the period of time that this duration occurs. But if we're anticipating a June start towards normalcy, which I think is in reason, certainly by July, we are in a shorter period of time. So I'm not certain in your appeal what our remedies really can be, not knowing that and the scope of it and what the responsibility that the city has. I look at some of the funds that have come in St. Pete and Tampa, that have been created for that purpose. Iconically, those have been created primarily by sports teams, and where the city has, where the team has the city's name as part of what they do. We don't have that kind of resource here. And we then go to companies who have multiple branches in the companies that could help in this, if they wanted to help fund a grant, have places all over the state or all over the Southeast, that they would have the same kind of responsibility to those local communities. So that makes it difficult for them to participate, because it's not just that they are home here. Maybe though, getting some of the stories out and having the chamber advise us either through one-on-ones that they'd like to do some, if they had some critical recommendations and they wanted to funnel those to us and we could hear those so that are offline, because I think if I were one of those businesses, I may not want to have that be the case. But if we could consolidate some of those conversations, that might be a way for us to do it. I don't know what our remedy is. And I don't know.
Okay, so I'll just say, I know that was kind of a diatribe and that's hard to kind of sift through and come up with an action item. And so I would say that my action items are twofold. One is have our business community share with us, like we had our health community experts share with us. So just as our health community enlightens us and tells us we didn't have to become doctors or nurses, we didn't have to necessarily provide them with PPE, but we heard what they were saying, and it gave us the soberness and the resolve, kind of bolstered our resolve to do what we needed to do to slow the spread because of what we heard. I think if we hear from our businesses the same thing and hear what they're going through, whether it's, Corey at the chamber or LDD, I just think we need to hear from them now. So it goes, wow, this is really tough, what people are going through. That's just one, just to hear from them. I'm not saying we have to, because honestly, anything the city does is a gift of the taxpayers. I'm really not asking for grants. I'm not asking for any money, because honestly, the second request is I'm ready to make some really tough decisions and cuts in the city budget, because that's what I'm saying. It's insensitive to think that we don't have to do anything as a city with our revenue losses when we see everyone else. We have to lead by not saying, no, we give people extra money during this time, or that city employees get to stay at home and not work and get paid. That we have to show the same kind of fiscal responsibility and willingness to cut. And I'm speaking specifically towards that hospital lease. I'm specific, talking about what we do with RP funding, going forward when we know that it loses, over $4 million a year. I mean, there are some things that we have to decide that are tough, that you can't just expect that businesses have to all live by these rules, but a city doesn't. That's what I'm talking about. A, let's hear from the community, just like we heard from the healthcare professionals, so we know how sober and hard this is. B, I'm challenging my colleagues that we're going to have to make some tough decisions during this budget cycle that we probably should have made before, but now is definitely incumbent upon us to go in with some resolve to make some serious cuts.
Commissioner McLeod.
Commissioner Walker was ahead of me, so go ahead, Commissioner Walker.
Okay, Commissioner Walker. I'm sorry, I didn't see his hand.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I hear you, Mr. Madden, and I don't think any of us is blind to what's happening and what we have to deal with and what we're going to have to move toward when it comes to our strategic planning and budgeting time. We've already been apprised, in some respect from our city manager that we're going to be looking at some cuts possibly, some things that we got to do and some directions redirect in some situations that we probably even have on the table that we want to say move forward and cannot move forward, will not move forward. Not that we cannot, but will not move forward. So I hear you and I empathize, because I do know the time is coming where we're going to have to do that. And as we move toward our planning time and move toward budgeting time, I'm sure, I will hope, because of what we've already been shared with by, in some respect, from our city manager and senior staff, that we're going to be looking at some cuts. That was told us 2 weeks ago. So I know we're going to be looking at how can we best make this thing, the city, of course, to be able to operate and do things maybe on more leaner, situations that we've had in the past. Now, let me move on to another subject, because I wasn't going to say anything about this, but I think I need to. The video that was done by LEDC, I thought was nice. I thought it was very well put together. I thought it was not good when it comes to a reflection of what our city looks like. I saw no diversity, and I shared that. And I continue to have to share that because you got communities of black and brown communities that still feel that, they're not being inclusive. And we, of course, can't do anything about that video. That's not a city video. We do as best as we can. And one of our, of course, city, I call mottos basically, is diversity. But when we see stuff like that, and then when I heard that there was some diversity kind of pictures or scenes that could have been included that were not included, I have a problem with that. And I have to tell you all, because if you don't hear it from me, well, I get it from the communities, then I have to tell you all. And it's important that we understand that, because I know we're going to move toward here very shortly, talking about the Lakeland History and Culture Center, that I think is so important for us in our community. But of course, that may have to take a back burner because of finances and financial situations that we'll be faced with as we come out of this COVID-19 situation. But mind you, we still have to be concerned about all people. And let's not forget that. And I continue to have to say that, and I hate saying it. I hate to be the one to always bring it up, but surely, I agree with you, Commissioner Madden. We're going to have to deal with these cuts and deal with these situations. And I'm on board. When we're ready to do that, we're ready to get that particular star to make it happen. And I agree. Businesses, I hear it, I see it, you see it, we all see it. They have not only suffering, but have suffered to the point where they may not even come back. We understand that, and we need to know, or they need to know, of course, that we as city and the city fathers, in some respect, are doing what we can to make sure that whatever support can be given, but also that we're cutting our straps or doing what we can to be as lean as possible also. Thank you.
I think you're right, Commissioner Walker. She's interested in having that same kind of representation of those tribulations that other people are going through on the healthcare side, represented for business. Commissioner McLeod.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both, Commissioner Walker and Commissioner Madden, for those comments. I've had the opportunity recently to do a couple of interviews with Telemundo. So I lived in Venezuela when I was in college, and Spanish was my minor, and speak Spanish. And it's just been a good reminder that we do have communities out there who may not be as represented. The Spanish-speaking community, as we all know, is growing. I appreciate Commissioner Walker bringing up comments about remembering the impact of the African-American community and those entrepreneurs right now. And so I think both comments are timely. And I had the chance last week to do a briefing with Bridge Local and Chris Ann Long's group, and I know others of you have been connected with them as well. But just hearing from small business owners and entrepreneurs and their life stories and how they're trying to claw through this and survive. And I heard a lot of emotion, a lot of anxiety, and just really just pleased for whatever you can do as a city leader. And I have thought, what is our role as a commission as we start to talk as a nation and a state about the other side of this and timing? I know we don't know all the details of that, but we are limited, and I think as the mayor brought that up, and what we can do as a city. But I think it's good to start talking about the other side and how we can support our local economy, entrepreneurs. I think bringing in the business representatives from the business community to give briefings and updates and what their members are going through is a great idea. I think that would put it in front of us and push us. How can we be creative? How can we do things maybe we haven't done before? Even if it doesn't necessarily involve funding, or we don't have the resources of some of the other major metropolitan areas that have large sports teams, but what can we do as leaders in our position to, even if it's just being a catalyst for something, or getting our business groups together and trying to put everyone on the same page? Because I think if there ever was a time for that collaboration between different groups that at times can be siloed, it would be now, to have everyone saying it's all hands on deck. And so I don't know. I had even thought maybe it's, we're seeing task forces at the federal and state levels on economic reopening. Does it make sense to have something at a local level that mirrors that? I don't know. I'm just putting that out there. I know our business community, a lot of the leaders are listening to these meetings. And so I just want to start talking about that, to know that, so they know, and that our entrepreneurs and and people whose livelihoods have taken a hit the past month that we're listening and that we're in tune with what they're going through, and we're here to do whatever we can, even if today we don't know exactly what that looks like.
So let's consider it kind of a raised hand of something we can get on an agenda, and either for our strategic planning, and we might provide a window of time for them within that period of time to be able to have a representation, to say something, or put it into some of the presentations on a commission meeting. City Manager Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, we've had our health officials come in during our special meetings. If it's the want of the city commission, I certainly can reach out to Corey and Julie and Steve and a number of other people and see if they are available at one of those special meetings, since we're having them on a weekly basis.
That's a good idea. Commissioner Walker.
I forgot to share, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, again, but yesterday on the call that was yesterday afternoon with Florida League of Cities and the White House and the White House correspondent, the director, and as well as DM with the state of Florida, there was mentioned that, of course, as you just mentioned, Commissioner Madden, the first wave of PPP has been exhausted, but there is a possible second wave that may be forthcoming. It was mentioned on the call yesterday afternoon, as well as some additional dollars, I understand, as was mentioned for small business loans too, that I get a second round kind of a thing. And I'm not knowing whether you all are aware of that, but that was shared by this White House correspondent, a director person that mentioned that on the call when we had the call yesterday with FLC and others around the state.
I thought it was interesting. They said they did $690 billion. I may be a little off on the numbers of loans in 12 days. That is 10 times what they would have done in a year. And the sponge was dry that went to go to that watering trough. And so it was interesting to see how quickly that happened. So I suspect the second wave is very likely, but we'll see. It's not something we control either. But City Manager Delgado, I do think that is a great idea to use that window of time on the special meetings to be able to do that, and maybe hit all, the organizations that might want to come and have a voice, including Bridge in that too. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a unique times we're in. Of course, I'm going to join in with Commissioner Madden here. We're very fortunate that in our enterprise system, we've had a lot of money of late, and I think we're getting ready to see some drastic changes in that. And of course, there again, with our luxuries and stuff that we've had, I am not of the mind to raise real estate taxes and stuff in the future. And of course, we're going to have to take hard looks at the Cleveland Heights, dog park, the arts, affordable housing, homelessness, and we're going to discuss the cultural center in a matter of minutes. Of course, we blew through the red light money like it was water standing still, and we may have to look at employees' benefits in the near future. And so there again, we are going to have to tighten up our belts, and I think we're going to have to make some drastic cuts in some programs or defer them for a while. And I just wanted to make that statement that when we get into this budget cycle, that I'm going to look at it very conservatively, because we're not sure how long this is going to last, and our citizens deserve good representation and frugalness. And just when I know my daughter called me last night from Tampa and said that they lifted the curfew in Tampa from yesterday, but that's everybody wants to have a little bit more freedoms, and I think we're trying to do that over as a nation. But overall, I can agree with Stephanie that we're going to need to really tighten our belts, and some of these programs that we're going to be discussing are not going to get my vote.
Okay. And it is. I don't disagree. I think we want to be fiscally conservative, and especially as we go forward. but let's take those one at a time and let's listen. And I do love Commissioner McLeod's comment too, that helps us be creative. Okay, since we have a work session to do to start at 9:30, would it be all right with you? It's 10:02. If we take a break till 10:15 and we come back together and start that, or do you want to just go ahead and keep moving through it?
Mr. Mayor,
go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, Don Selvage is ready and the presentation's up, and it's only maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes if you guys want to go straight through.
What's your preference? Can you go through? Nod. Okay, go ahead. Thank you very much for joining us, Don, by the way. And I saw your camera flip for a second, so if we can see your face, that'd be great. I'm waiting for you, Don. And I'm sure you're clicking away.
Mr. Selvage, are you ready?
Mr. Franklin is doing his stand exercise.
Yes.
That's good.
Well, he notified me.
Did you all hear me?
Yes, we have heard you. Go ahead. Give the prelude.
As you all know, you all gave us permission to create a committee to look at, what will be presented by Don Selvage, former Commissioner Don Selvage, as he became the chair of our committee as we met, over this past year. But as you all know, this particular subject matter, excuse me, dates back probably almost a couple of years or more, where we were talking about a couple of particular situations in our city, age-friendly Lakeland, as well as the what we call now the Lakeland History and Culture Center. As a result of what there's many discussions that we had probably 2+ years or so ago, age-friendly Lakeland, of course, has moved on to have its pretty much, I guess, permanent somewhat office and set up, as you know, over in the over at not called Gandapu, but the you just went blank. Near Gandapu. I'm sorry. I thought I was going to say something.
Age-friendly Lakeland is set up over at Kelly Rec at this point.
Yes, Kelly Rec. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. And of course, we as a committee began to move forward with some topics and discussions on how we can make, this particular center come to fruition, for our city. And I want to take it away from any thunder that my chairman will be presenting here. Well, we've had many meetings. I've kind of helped along the way, share with you all some, I guess, what was happening and how we were coming along. And now we're at this point, of course, to share with you what our recommendations would be. There's been a drawing, I will call, of such that the P&R, Parks and Recreation Center, along with an architect, has envisioned for this particular place to be in our main library downtown. And the reason why we chose that location, of course, being pretty much a center of attraction for people of all ethnicities, gender, age as well, that come to a local center as such, or a local focal point as such. So Don is on. I'll stop talking and rambling, and then we move forward.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir. We sure can.
All right. Thank you. And I recognize you have a lot on your plate right now, but I hope this presentation gives us an opportunity to take a respite from discussing the pandemic and focus on an exciting initiative that you all started last year when you authorized $300,000 to build a cultural enrichment center at the city's main library on Lake Morton. And you also chartered a committee with the mission of coming back to you with recommendations on how we do this, the design, the building, the operations. And so the goal that we gave the committee from the beginning was to create a destination at the main library where the contributions to our city's history and traditions from all cultures and businesses can be celebrated. So I'm here today to let you know what the committee did and our recommendations to you. Now, but before proceeding, I do have to address the elephant in the room, and that's funding in the aftermath of the pandemic. The committee fully realizes that you're going to have to set priorities and reset priorities. This is a profound time in our lives, and so the committee respects that, but I ask that today you focus on the concept that we're proposing and not discuss funding. That's above my pay grade and the committee's pay grade. That's going to be between and among you as you go forward with the budget. So today, I'd just like to take a break from the virus and talk about this exciting initiative that you all started last year rather. Now, I know that there are many in the audience that's asking, what in the world is Selvage doing, participating in anything doing with culture? And that's a good question. But not to worry, the individuals that we put together on this committee more than made up for its chairman's shortfalls in this area. Commissioner Walker and I took great pains to recruit a talented and diverse group of Lakelanders who are passionate about our city and history. The city staff, as always, stepped up in a big way. Some are not listed above on this slide, but they include Bob Donahue and Pam Page and Parks and Rec, Jenny Sykes, who was wonderful in talking to us about ADA expectations, and not the least, City Manager Tony Delgado. And thank you all for your support and others that I did not list. But then we had staff directly involved, led by our wonderful city librarian, Lisa Lilliquist, Luann Mims, if you haven't met Luann, who runs the special collections at the library, a wonderful historian and supporter, and Emily Foster from the Community Development Department, Historical Preservation Senior Planner. Alex Rich, elected to participate personally, and he was a big help to us from the Polk County Museum Executive Director position, telling us about what it takes to run a, quote, a museum, an exhibit center. And he also brought to light some potential partnerships in the future between the museum and the library dealing with these matters. Michelle Anderson joined us from the board of directors, as did Sue Bentley, a very active community leader. Ahmad Taylor, a Lakeland native son now living in Atlanta, brought the perspective of an artist to the group. He is the son of Everett Taylor, and you'll know that the Urban Garden out on Massachusetts, the mural there was put up by Ahmad. Businesses were represented by Robert Lee, Sally Brisbane, and James Ring. And in his own way, Commissioner Walker was always present, offering encouragement and perspective. So the next slide, Kevin. What we did, we met monthly at the library, and we kick it off with a presentation. And 3 committee members gave presentations, including Devon McShay, whose book a few years ago, Our Lakeland, the Other End of Florida Avenue. If you haven't read it, it's a very interesting and enlightening presentation of the leadership in that part of our city over the years. Teresa Martinez from the Spanish Institute wrote a wonderful book about 5 or 6 years ago that called The Success in Exile, 5 Decades of Cuban Stories, about the Cuban American experience in Polk County. And it's another book you should read. And finally, Professor Kat Eskin, a delightful professor from Florida Southern, who's done extensive research and has oral histories on the Lakeland Jewish community. Last but not least is Cantor Brown, the noted author from Fort Meade, who's written a number of books about Polk County in Florida. And he wrote the signature a book about Polk County called None Can Have Better, Richer Memories. It's a 2-volume book that tells the story of Polk County. And he's written other books about Polk County and Central Florida. Cantor spoke to us. He's very excited about this project, congratulating us on embracing Lakeland's rich and diverse history. His newest book just came out a few months ago. Is a biography of Henry Plant, and I'll refer to that book later in the presentation. So the intent of these presentations was to give us some appreciation for Lakeland's history and cultural roots. Next slide. We did take a field trip to Tampa in February. We went to the Robert W. Sanders Senior Library in Ybor City. It's an impressive tribute to the many contributions of the Tampa Bay area African Americans. It took about 8-9 years to really build and put together. It offers visual experiences and a number of displays through exhibits and a resource center for research. The Tampa Bay History Center sits on the Hillsborough River on Channelside. It's a wonderful day visit. The Columbia Restaurant is right there. And there the officials were kind enough to take us through the background of how to build a museum, a history, the ins and outs, what the infrastructure is required. And so that was a very entertaining and informative day. I also took the time to go over and see the St. Petersburg History Building. It's located at the foot of the pier in downtown St. Petersburg. It's a simple but very effective presentation that tells the story of St. Petersburg. Now, admittedly, Tampa and St. Petersburg are much larger than Lakeland, so we had to keep that in mind in the scale as we discuss this. Next slide. Next slide, Kevin. Okay, thank you. No, back. I'm sorry, Kevin. Back to the slide there. Okay, but Lakeland is the largest city in Polk County. And it's interesting that the other cities and towns in Polk County have established sites that pay tribute to their history. Pictured above includes picture of Lake Wales, Haines City, Winter Haven, Fort Meade, and Bartow. And including some years ago, the county's designation of the old courthouse as the County Historical Museum, which has proved to be a real resource for the city or the county's history. But where in Lakeland does one go to grasp and appreciate its history? And it's not like Lakeland has ignored that. If you go out to Coleman Bush, the Coleman Bush Boasters Club has a number of photographs, memorabilia, and artifacts out there to see. City Hall is lined with tremendous and wonderful pictures of our city's history. Florida Southern, the Citrus Hall of Fame and archives, the Frank Lloyd Wright exhibits, the Lakeland the Veterans Memorial Park pays tributes to our first responders and the veterans in all of our wars since the Civil War. So it's not that Lakeland has ignored its past. And we've had local businesses pay tribute. If you walk into Peterson Myers law firm, Allen and Company, the Bank of Central Florida, go to Haycock Insurance Agency, where you'll see its old City Hall, and they paid tribute to that. And of course, we've had a number of heroes who have protected our history. We have an active historical preservation association led by the likes of Gene Bunch and others. So it's not that we have ignored our history. It's just that we think and believe, we believe that it's time for us to build a site that is the focal point for our history. Next, please. John Kirk from Strawn Trout Architects has the contract to do this. And he presented us with initial drawings and renderings. And as any architect will tell you, this is renderings, it's not the final product. But I'd like you to visualize the current library setup. And as you pass the reception desk and proceed to the special collections area down the hall and to your right, the design calls for the exhibit center to extend from that wall that you see in the far part of the top photograph, and then curve around to the western edge of the current special collections area. That'll give us about 1,400 square feet of exhibit space. So as you can see, you'd walk into the library, go down and enter the Lakeland Historical and Culture Center. Now, the committee's proposal is to build semi-permanent displays along the walls leading to the exhibit center. They could feature, for example, an African-American display, another telling about downtown renovation, or a particular industry like citrus, with photographs and memorabilia and tributes focused on that one theme. But the primary exhibit hall would present, quote, temporary displays with an overall theme that would remain in place for 6 months to a year and focus on a major event, activity, or effort, and all of the contributions of Lakelanders that went into handling that crisis or moving forward in that. For example, there could be an exhibit on women's suffrage, or the Great Depression, the citrus industry, or, as I'll talk later, the railroad. And what we want to do in this exhibit is to emphasize the unifying contributions of so many people in Lakeland who make this city such a unique place. Now, the center itself is the last component of the overall library renovation. I think there are 8 steps that are currently scheduled to begin later this year. The exhibit center would be the last of those renovations. And we were told that we could expect, under the current timeline, a completion in the fall of 2021. Next slide. So with that, I'm here today to respectfully recommend your approval of 10 actions to take. We recommended early that we change the name from the Cultural Enrichment Center to the Lakeland History and Culture Center. The Cultural Enrichment Center implies a venue of performing arts and ignores or fails to mention the primary component of this is the history of Lakeland. And so we're recommending that we change the name. We have recommended we establish a City of Lakeland account at the GiveWell Community Foundation for this effort. This is standard. The city has a couple of other accounts down there now. And any funds supporting this effort would go to the GiveWell Community Foundation, and disbursements would be approved by the city manager, the city finance director, or the city Parks and Recs director. We're going to need about $50,000 of equipment prior to opening in the fall of 2021. I've never thought about building a museum or an exhibit hall, but there are things like audio-visual, display cases, movable walls, things that you wouldn't normally think of, but we're going to have to buy to put into that empty space. So that's one of the first things that we have to do. We think overall, to get this done, we're going to need about $150,000 in sponsorships and fundraising. And we'd ask him for your approval of the concept, where the main exhibit hall would be used for major exhibits, perhaps one per year, and then direct the building of semi-permanent displays in or adjacent to the exhibit hall. We hopefully planned a grand opening in fall of 2021, and we recommend that we feature the railroad. Not just the railroad and the beginnings of Lakeland, that's certainly important, the partnership between Henry Plant and Alfred Bunn that Cantor Brown writes about in his newest book. But what the railroad has done and impacted on Lakeland, good and bad, for the last 133 years. Its impact on development and all the things that Lakeland started off as a railroad town and what's happened with the railroad over the century. I recommend we disband the current advisory committee next month. I recruited members of this, promising them that there was a beginning and an end to their service. And I think we need to charter a new advisory committee because the focus now has to be on creating this exhibit. And you do not want people like me on a creative subcommittee. And we need to focus in working with Luann Mims and Lisa and the museum in building this exhibit. And we need another focus on community outreach, on fundraising, on grants, etc. So we're recommending that we disband the current advisory committee and charter a new one that would start working on these two assignments. And we believe that the responsibility now for going forward goes to the City of Lakeland librarian and a special collection librarian. Luann Mims will essentially become the curator of this center. And so this advisory committee would work with Lisa and Luann in building this exhibit for what we hope would be a knock your socks off grand opening in the fall of 2021 or whatever. And finally, we strong-arm Gal Fields to chair this committee, and he has agreed to serve if you will appoint him. Next slide. Now, this advisory committee, as I said, would have two components. One is exhibit planning. It would focus on the exhibits and its content, the idea, the equipment needed, cost estimates and timelines. And on the left there, you see the community outreach effort. And that includes marketing, public awareness, funding through the City of Lakeland, grants, sponsorships, all those things that we need to do to make this viable. Next slide. And it would look like this. Gal would be the spokesperson for the committee. And Gal is a former mayor, a long-term public servant, highly respected, a Lakeland native. We see Gal as the guiding leader of this effort, but also the spokesperson, that he can reach out to the community and represent what we're trying to do here. Luann Mims would lead the exhibit planning subcommittee. A number of our current committee members have asked to serve going forward on that committee. You'll notice that Don Selvage is not on that committee. On the community outreach part, Gal has asked me to chair that, and on that would be Commissioner Walker. Sue Bentley has agreed to help us, and I'm hoping to find a professional marketing fundraiser, PR type person who's passionate about this, who will join it as well. So that's what the committee would look like. And I'd want to convene this in June and start planning and moving forward from then. Next slide. Okay, before I go to questions, I just want to tell you, this has been an honor and a real delight to work with some wonderful people who really care about this city. And I hope my presentation, as inarticulate as it was, adequately represented the hard work and commitment exhibited by these extraordinary residents of our city on this committee. And we all see this as a critical first step in establishing a site for celebrating this city's unique history. Who knows where it'll go from here? But I make no bones about it. I hope that one day we'll have a ribbon cutting for a Lakeland History Center that celebrates this city's unique and wonderful history. So I stand for questions.
Well, first of all, describing your presentation as inarticulate would be very inappropriate because it was wonderfully inclusive, which is exactly what we would expect from you because of your comprehensiveness. So thank you so much for that, Don, and the work and the leadership. Commissioners, comments? All right, Commissioner Franklin, then Commissioner Walker.
Yeah, Don, I just again want to echo. It's obvious your committee put a whole lot of work into this. I appreciate the thought into the different points that you drew out there. The name change, I think that's reflective of what we're really trying to encompass here. the realities of the fiscal situation we're in now, and I think there's a path ahead for that. So I would just agree. I'm positive this is going to come to pass, and I think the work that your group has laid as a foundation here is going to help make that happen.
I hope they're all watching, so I thank you for those comments.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I also want, again, to say thank you to Don and of course, the leadership that he's kind of led the way and been able to make sure he keep us all on track and making sure those things that were important to bring this particular kind of a report back to you all as my fellow colleagues was so important to me. But he asked me a question, and I don't mind answering that question because I don't know if he read the email yet that I hopefully would have by now. But he asked me a question, and he said, Philip, how do you feel about, the situation because of what we're faced with now, as I've already alluded to in some earlier comments about where we stand with our financial picture, or as we may have to deal with cuts and those kind of things. So I'm going to read you what I shared with him via email on last night, when I gave some thought and prayer to how should I respond. I said, good evening, Don. While I certainly have reservations about city's financial situation once we're back to business with our quote unquote new norm, I would not want to us to allow this project, to be worked on to be on a back burner for so long that it does not come somewhat to fruition. But I know, again, it could take a back burner. So even now, dealing with the COVID-19 crisis, we're finding ourselves in discussion, at least I am, I know, I have been on numerous calls regarding the effects of the challenge, especially when it comes to Black and brown communities. I would not have a problem, as I continue to share with him, with us not being in a forward aggressive movement of the culture center, I should say, but I would not vote for any new projects, which may arise as time goes on, of course, that may take precedent over this particular project, because again, I think it's too important for our city and overall future direction of our city. So I just shared with him, looking forward to seeing him, of course, this morning as he present to us, I think he so eloquently has done. And I want to make sure you all know that I have, even as I think many of the committed folk having a heart to want to see something like this come to fruition, would not have a problem if we have to say, hey, maybe not this time, and moving forward aggressively as we may want to do, but certainly not lose sight of what we may want to do at time and as time moves on. So thank you.
And Commissioner Walker, I would assume some of that's because of the long duration and history of just trying to get to where we are today. Wouldn't you agree? And the need to keep that momentum moving.
And yes, we could do that because it's going, as he has already asked for us to move forward with. Now we're establishing two new committees. One is dealing with the financial aspect, as he has shared with you, and then one is dealing with actual, what would this particular center have included in it? What kind of opening kind of theme, as we've already said as a committee, we would like to have with the railroad history of Lakeland and how Lakeland came to be where it is today, and it's going to take time to do that. It's not going to happen overnight, especially now with what we're having to probably face with as we come back from and have to establish our new norm.
Commissioner McCarley.
Mr. Selvage, thank you so much. That was so articulate and soothing in the height of all this craziness that's going on. I appreciate hearing you speak. And I appreciate your whole team's compassion and passion about a collective history for the city of Lakeland. I think that is so important at this time. And I think that the value of history right now is something that we should all put our rubber stamp on, just because we don't want history to repeat itself. And I think we're in a really unique time right now. So it's a good time to talk about the history of Lakeland and where we've been and the other things that we've been through collectively and how we have persevered. So I think that I would love to see this move. I love all of the bullet points and the suggestions that you've made to the City Commission, changing it changing the name and then your definitive approach to how it'll be led in the future. The exhibit piece specifically, I am most interested in because I think that history is more than posters on a wall in a library. So having that team of professionals come together to really consider how it can be a living experience in our public library. And then, you know, that's really the foundation of where it may go in the future to its own place, and a great starting point. So I just want to congratulate your entire team. I hope they are listening. We know you've put a lot of heart and soul and faith into this project, and congratulations on that. And I'm sure we'll find a way moving forward of how to best support you all.
Thank you, sir.
And I think another, if I could just hitch onto that a smidge, Commissioner McCarley, another fear sometimes from the minorities' perspectives is that if you're going to do a history, that you're then going to minimize ours, when in fact that's the history. While we're not the spirit of this. The spirit of this is that we're going to maximize everyone's that are contributors along the way. Can you comment on that, Don?
There is no doubt that there are people in this community who feel like their contributions have been minimized or overlooked as a city going forward. But I want to tell you all that we never in this committee had to fight getting a consensus. This group wants to be inclusive. We want to tell the story of course, the African Americans, the Cuban Americans, the Puerto Ricans, the other minorities. But just as important is the story of Publix, of the citrus industry. And everybody who built those industries. So there was never in this committee says, well, we are afraid that you're overlooking us. But that was one of the first themes when we came together. There was a feeling that one thing we do need to correct, maybe not correct is the right word, but we need to emphasize going forward that we're all in this together. And this current crisis, if it does nothing else, shows us this. 50 years ago, we will have an exhibit that talks about Lakeland's response to the virus. And the community's coming together. So we have a choice. We can unify and recognize going forward. So I do want to say that this committee does not have an agenda. It's not going to be an African American museum. Commissioner Walker has said from the front, we want to recognize the people, the citizens who have made this city so unique.
Commissioner Madden.
Well, I absolutely agree with Commissioner McCarley and Mayor Mutz, and thank you so much, Don, for bringing this to our attention. I hope that we can get a copy of your slides, if you'd send those to us, just so that we can look them over and keep those front of mind. And just remember the people who are on the committee and maybe reach out to them as well. I remember, Commissioner Walker, that was one of the first things we were able to discuss, coming into the commission, because the monument was such a monumental topic of discussion, and really quite shocking and surprising for me, not really giving that monument a lot of attention, growing up, from 15 years old in Lakeland. And during that time, I was so thankful that we had Commissioner Walker on this commission. And since then, I have been so in awe of Commissioner Walker's leadership and perspective, even from when he said, I wasn't allowed to go to Adair Park growing up. When none of us have that experience, none of us have that history. And so it's hard to take the full measure of grief or regret without really knowing what was lost. And most of the comments that came around the issue of the monument were, we don't want to destroy history. We don't want to lose our history. And what kept coming back to me is, we already have. We already have destroyed history. We've already lost a great deal of history here in Lakeland, and we're trying to make it right. And I think that I certainly am not opposed to having a rich array of history displayed in this cultural, what are we calling it? The Lakeland History and Cultural Center. But I think for me, when I came alongside Commissioner Walker, you know, whether it was during the Red Light Camera Fund to get this money or with the discussions when he was bringing it up, I really wanted to fight for him, because I felt like, once again, it could be true that it would find a small piece in this mosaic rather than a large expression. And the reason it needs a bigger expression is because nobody seemed to know. Nobody knew about Moorhead. Nobody knew that the first citizens that came to Lakeland were the railroad workers, who were an African-American community, who established churches and schools and neighborhoods. And now they're gone. None of them remain. The history was erased. And so I certainly want to draw attention to all facets of history. I'm not against it. I love museums. I love history. But I cannot, go forward without at least reminding my colleagues in our community that this really was birthed out of the awareness that we had lost history already, that there were things people didn't even know about our community, neighborhoods that were gone. And I really want to make sure that that is a seminal work of this History Center. It's not just, you made mention, Don, about, some of the other places that recognize our history. Some of the bank buildings and some of the office buildings where we can find a lot of our history in a lot of our downtown buildings. To my knowledge, the only place I find pictures of Moorhead are at the Bartow Museum. And I think they do have some, some pictures and some representation there, which I appreciate. But I really want to make sure that, as the person who brought up, a sober and austere focus on budget season, I am absolutely passionate about making right what may have been wrong. And so therefore, this takes a very high priority, in my opinion. And I think that it is a conservative fiscal approach to make the concession to not have it a standalone museum right now, but to work within the library structure, which people across the country have lost funding for libraries, and libraries have had to, the ones who are vibrant have been reimagined. And I think when we added Black and Brew to our library, and now we're adding this culture and history to our library, to me, it's quite forward thinking. It's innovative. I think it's a place that becomes a destination for not just our community, but others, because they can go across the street to another museum. Maybe we could pair some of our displays with the museum for big topics of broader importance, or to bring awareness. So I'm really thankful. I want you to feel so appreciated today, Commissioner Walker, for your representation of a marginalized part of our population. And you're a shining example of what we hope for all of our citizens, your life story. And I'm appreciative that Don Selvage, as a former commissioner who worked alongside Commissioner Walker and probably observed some of those same things that I'm observing as a new commissioner, wanted to walk alongside Commissioner Walker and make sure that this happened, and that it's as beautiful and as lovely and as excellent as it can be. And that, yes, it showcases other facets of our city's history, but that the biggest, shiniest facet would hopefully, in my opinion, be to represent some of those things that were lost in our African American community. So thank you all so much. I'll be the first one to write a check when you start to raise money, Commissioner Selvage. And I appreciate this so much. This is a real, like when Commissioner McCarley said this is a bright light today in a dark time, to me, it is absolutely the truth, because you lived through some very dark times and you're a shining example of coming through that and leading. And so I hope for people, for us to come from this dark time. So thank you all so much.
And also what you're advocating is that we recover what can be remembered right now. And we're in that moment and era of some of the history, some of the seniors in our African American and Hispanic arenas that can talk about some of those things. So that's important.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Madden. You'll be one of the first people I call about raising money. Of all the metaphors used to describe the diversity in our country, my favorite is that of a quilt. I see this country's diversity as a beautiful, multicolored quilt, different shapes and sizes, forms, all held together by a thread of common values, patriotism, liberty, and democracy. And so that's how I tried to guide the committee, that we are a wonderful community with unique people, philanthropists. When you look at this city's philanthropy over the years, so it's more than just one segment of the community we want to recognize. But make no mistake, the things you bring up are there. And I think that will be exhibited fairly and objectively by the library and the center going forward. But thank you both for your support.
Well, you keep up those colorful metaphors, you'll be on the other side of that committee because that's excellently done with the quilt analogy, sir. Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner McLeod, was that a hand raise?
Yes, it was. Thank you, Mayor. I just most of my colleagues have expressed a lot of what I was thinking as well, but I just wanted to take a moment and thank Don and the committee members for the thought and hours that they put into this, because that's evident in your presentation that there's been a lot of purposeful planning behind this. And it is refreshing to take a break from a lot of the issues that have been bearing down on us and to envision what this could look like, a grand opening of sorts in 2021. And I just think there's real opportunity to generate a lot of momentum and energy in our community around this project. And so I'm excited to see that in the coming months. And just thank you again to you and the committee members who are listening. I think it's a job well done, and excited to support it from our end as however we can.
Thank you, Chuck.
So what are the next steps for the commission in this, City Manager Delgado or City Attorney Palmer, Ed Davis?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, obviously there were some things that were asked that were not related to the financial side, that being the ability to go ahead and restructure and reconvene a new committee, the acceptance of Gal Fields as the committee chair, the plan itself, allowing John Kirk and those folks to continue to move forward, that related to the plan. And then obviously there was an ask for additional financial support, which could be taken up now or could be taken up later as we discuss the overall budget. But I think some of the key areas really stem in the organizational side. And Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of what you're asking today.
Yes, but the convening of the committee will allow us to start the fundraising effort. And we're not asking for $50,000 in the next budget. We understand. We have an obligation to go to the community and try to raise money. We understand that commitment. So yes, Tony, organizational, I need approval to step down and give Gal Fields a call and then start the community outreach and planning, funding notwithstanding.
And we could separate the funding for a later time. Commissioner Walker.
Just to piggyback again on what Chairman Salvage, Don Savage has said about, how we're moving forward. And we have all, and I know in various meetings that we've had, numerous meetings we've had, made it quite aware to our committee members that, it's going to take us and the lead from us to make sure that the Lakeland community as a whole know how important we feel the fundraising aspect would be, and as we move in that particular moment in time to start raising money and being able to, go out and get the money that we need or solicit for dollars that we may need. So the committee, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Don, you correct me, but they're keenly aware, even though we might have been split up, will be split up to serve maybe in some capacity where some are moving more toward I call the artsy and cultural stuff that I don't have either. But then while others of us we move toward, so Don, I'm glad it will serve and be part of that fundraising effort. And I've even shared with, especially so in some key neighborhood meetings around the core African American community, because a lot of talk has been about this, in that community, which I'm sure many of you all may be aware. I know the mayor is keenly aware that they're going to, hey, ante up, because we need to make sure that that Lakeland as a whole see not only the philanthropists that may come up and give dollars, but also those, everyday Joe Blows and Jane Blows would actually give dollars as well.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, I'm anxious to get started with the community outreach, to start telling the story, to use Gal Fields as a spokesperson to tell the story. But Philip and I have talked about a grassroots fundraising campaign. If this is going to be a Lakeland culture or history and center, then we need the citizens of Lakeland to help out, and not just through taxpayer dollars. We fully understand that. And so I agree with the mayor. Let's get the committee started, and let's start getting the word out. And on a parallel path, we'll start raising money, and we'll find out if there's support there. But we're not coming to the city first. Let's go out and tell the story and raise money, and then see what happens with your very profound decisions going forward. But we're going to get there. It may not be next year, but we will get there.
So is there a motion to approve the cultural recommendations of his presentation? Commissioner McCarley.
So moved.
And Commissioner Franklin second. Okay. And Commissioner Madden third. So discussion on the motion. Any discussion by the audience on this motion? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand so it's visible. Opposed, same. Unanimously passes. Thank you for your work, sir. I think that's a representation of the enthusiasm.
This is one of the few times in my over 8 years of service that I've got a unanimous vote. You're getting easy.
See, you just realize how good you're getting, right? That's great. All right. Are there any other matters to be brought up with respect to the Lakeland Cultural and Historical Center? If there are none, then I think our workshop is adjourned, and so is your work in this meeting. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.